Mark Thompson had always believed that owning a home was the American dream. After years of hard work and careful saving, he finally bought a modest two-story house with a small backyard in Brookside Estates, a quiet neighborhood just outside of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. He loved coming home to the sound of birds in the morning, the smell of fresh-cut grass, and the peaceful feeling of being surrounded by neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. But not everyone in Brookside Estates was as easygoing as Mark. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, was run with a tight grip by one woman, Deborah Langston. Most people didn't say her name out loud when she wasn't around. Instead, they called her HOA Karen, a nickname that spread quietly through the community like wildfire. She was known for walking around with a clipboard, taking notes, and making sure every fence was painted the right shade of white and every mailbox stood exactly where it should. Deborah took pride in being in charge. She saw herself as the protector of property values and order, but many residents saw her differently, as someone who enjoyed power a little too much. Mark had never had any problems with the HOA before. He made sure his trash cans were hidden away, his Christmas lights came down on time, and his car was always off the street by nightfall. But things changed one summer when his life got turned upside down. It started with a family emergency. Mark's older brother had been in a car accident and needed help recovering. Without thinking twice, Mark packed a bag and drove 3 hours to be there. He stayed for over a week, helping his brother move around the house, cook meals, and handle paperwork with the insurance company. By the time he returned home, everything else had fallen behind, including his lawn. The grass was tall, the weeds were creeping up near the sidewalk, and a few flower beds looked neglected. He felt bad about it, but he figured he could fix it quickly once he got back on his feet. That same day he got home, he found a notice taped to his front door. It was from the HOA. In bold red letters it read, "Violation notice, overgrown lawn." Mark sighed. He knew it wasn't perfect yet, but he also thought a simple reminder would have been enough. Still, he didn't argue. He told himself to get the lawnmower out first thing the next morning. The next day, however, it rained all day long, and then it rained again the day after that. The ground was soaked, and the mower wouldn't run without getting stuck. Mark waited patiently for the weather to clear, but Deborah didn't wait. 3 days later, another notice arrived. This time it included a fine, $150 for failing to correct the violation within the required time frame. Mark was stunned. He hadn't even had a dry day to fix it yet. He decided to write a polite email to the HOA board, explaining what had happened, his brother's accident, the travel, the rain, and asking if they could waive the fine or give him a few more days. He copied the message to the full board, hoping someone reasonable might step in. Only Deborah replied. Her response was cold and short. Emergencies do not excuse HOA violations. All homeowners are expected to maintain their properties regardless of personal circumstances. She added that if the lawn wasn't fixed within 48 hours, the fine would double. Mark was frustrated but still tried to keep calm. He waited for the rain to stop, borrowed his neighbor's leaf blower to dry up some of the mud, and finally got the lawnmower going. He spent the whole weekend cleaning up the yard, mowing, edging, pulling weeds, and even replanting a few flowers to make it look better. When he was done, he took a photo and sent it to Deborah along with a thank you note, hoping to end the conversation on a good note. Instead, she sent another notice. This time it was about the color of his mulch. Improper. Mulch color in front flower bed. Please replace with approved brown mulch only. Mark couldn't believe it. His yard now looked better than most on the street. But instead of fixing something so minor, he decided to speak up. He went to the next HOA meeting, sat in the second row, and asked to speak during the public comment period. "I've followed the rules," he said, looking directly at Deborah. "I understand we need standards, but I think fairness matters too. My lawn was fixed on time, and I was fined anyway. I'd appreciate knowing why." There was silence in the room. No one ever challenged Deborah like that. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We enforce the rules equally for everyone. If we start making exceptions, then the rules mean nothing. Some people nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. After the meeting, Mark noticed several neighbors giving him small nods of support. One older man even stopped him on the way out. "You did the right thing," he whispered. "We're all just afraid to say anything." From that moment on, things got worse. Over the next few weeks, more notices showed up at Mark's house. A tree branch hanging slightly over the sidewalk, a crack in the driveway, a potted plant left too close to the curb. None of them were serious issues. Most were things he hadn't even noticed before. But Deborah was watching, and she was keeping score. One evening, Mark saw her walking past his house with her clipboard, staring at his windows like she was looking for something wrong. When she caught him watching, she gave him a slow smile and kept walking. He began to feel like he was living under a microscope. Every corner of his property was being judged, and no matter how hard he tried, it was never enough. Then came the worst notice of all: violation. Improper storage of outdoor items. Please relocate all tools and equipment to garage or shed immediately. Mark checked his backyard. His garden tools were neatly lined up against the wall of the garage. There was a wheelbarrow covered with a tarp. Nothing was messy or unsafe. He snapped a photo and replied with a question. "Can you clarify which items are in violation? I want to make sure I follow the rules correctly." Deborah's reply was quick and sharp. "You know what's wrong. Fix it." That's when Mark realized this wasn't about the rules anymore. It was personal. He wasn't going to let her win. Mark had always tried to be a good neighbor. He never played loud music late at night. He kept his trash bins tucked away, and he even helped shovel snow for the elderly couple across the street. But now it felt like everything he did was being watched. Every small mistake was being used against him. Deborah Langston, the HOA president everyone whispered about, seemed to have made it her mission to make Mark's life difficult. The fines started piling up, small amounts at first, $50 here, $75 there, but they added up fast. She found new violations almost every week: the color of his doormat, the way he stacked his firewood, even the angle of his mailbox. One morning, Mark came outside and saw something strange near his basement window. There were wet marks on the ground, like someone had been hosing down the grass. At first, he thought maybe one of the neighbors had accidentally left their sprinkler on too long. But when he opened the basement door, his heart sank. Water was everywhere. It wasn't just damp, it was soaked. His tools were floating in puddles, cardboard boxes had collapsed, and the smell of mildew already hung in the air. A few feet away, his old laptop sat half submerged in water, completely ruined. He rushed over to check what little family memorabilia he had stored down there. Most of it was soaked beyond repair. He stood there, stunned. How could this happen? It hadn't rained that much lately, and the basement had never flooded before. Then he remembered the wet spot outside. His eyes narrowed. He ran upstairs and checked the security camera he'd installed after receiving so many strange notices. He didn't use it often, but now he wished he had been watching it more closely. He rewound the footage to the previous night, and there she was, Deborah Langston, wearing dark clothes and holding a garden hose, standing near the basement window well. She looked around to make sure no one was watching, then turned on the hose and pointed it straight into the opening. Mark couldn't believe what he was seeing. He paused the video, rewound it, and watched again. There was no mistake. She had done it on purpose. He sat back, heart pounding. This wasn't just an abuse of power anymore. This was revenge. He printed out screenshots, saved the video to multiple drives, and even backed it up online. Then he called the police. The officer who showed up was named Officer Ramirez. He was calm and professional, and as Mark explained what happened, he took notes carefully. "This looks like intentional damage," Officer Ramirez said, looking at the footage. "Flooding a basement like this can cost thousands to fix." "I know," Mark replied. "I've already spent most of the weekend trying to clean it up." "Did you two have any kind of conflict before this?" "You could say that," Marky said, handing over copies of all the violation notices. "She's been coming after me for weeks. over things that weren't even real problems. Officer Ramirez flipped through the pages, raising an eyebrow. "That's a lot of paperwork," he muttered. "You might want to talk to your city council or a lawyer about HOA laws. But right now I'll file a report on this incident. If we can prove intent, charges may be possible." Mark thanked him and closed the door after he left. He felt a little better knowing the authorities were involved, but he also knew Deborah wouldn't go quietly. The next day he sent an email to the full HOA board, attaching the video, the photos, and the police report. "This is unacceptable behavior from our HOA president. I'm not asking for revenge, I just want this to stop. Please review the attached evidence and take appropriate action." Within hours, the neighborhood was buzzing. People started talking openly this time. Neighbors who had once stayed quiet began sharing their own stories about Deborah. One woman said she'd been fined for hanging Christmas lights a day past the deadline. Another man claimed she locked the community pool gate during a heat wave because he missed a meeting. Soon, a petition started circulating. Residents wanted Deborah removed from the HOA board, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. At the next HOA meeting, she stood at the front with her usual clipboard and icy smile. "I've seen the emails," she said calmly. "Some of you seem to think I did something wrong. Let me be clear. I was simply checking the foundation for cracks. Water helps reveal issues in the concrete. That's part of my job." A few people in the crowd gasped. Mark stood up. "I have video proof, showing you pointing a hose directly into my basement window well," he said firmly. "That's not inspecting. That's sabotage." Deborah didn't flinch. "And yet," she said smoothly, "you still haven't proven intent. Maybe I was helping. Maybe the water washed away dirt so I could see better. You're making accusations without facts." There was silence. Then an older man named Mr. Carter, who lived 2 doors down, raised his hand. "I've lived here for 15 years, he said, "and I've never seen anyone abuse their position like this. We deserve leadership, not punishment." More hands went up. People started speaking out one by one. By the end of the meeting, a vote was called. The motion to remove Deborah from the HOA board passed overwhelmingly. Still, she didn't leave quietly. As she walked out, she looked straight at Mark. "This isn't over," she said under her breath. Mark didn't flinch. "It never was," he replied. The day after the HOA meeting, Mark woke up to a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't relief exactly. It was more like tension. He had won a battle, sure, but he knew Deborah Langston wouldn't let this go easily. She had been kicked off, the board stripped of her authority, and publicly shamed by the neighbors she used to control with fear. But something told him she wasn't done yet. He walked outside and checked his mailbox. Inside was a letter, not from the HOA, but from the county courthouse. His eyes scanned the page quickly. Someone had filed a complaint against him. It was from Deborah. The letter said she was accusing him of harassment and spreading false information about her. It claimed he had used misleading video footage to damage her reputation, and that the petition started by neighbors was based on lies. She was asking for damages, thousands of dollars, and wanted the court to officially clear her name. Mark read it twice, then folded it slowly and put it back in the envelope. He didn't feel surprised anymore. He felt angry. He called Officer Ramirez again and explained what had happened. "She's trying to flip the script," Mark said. "Now I'm the bad guy?" Officer Ramirez sighed over the phone. "That's not unusual," he said. "People who get caught often try to turn the tables, but don't worry. We have your report, your video, and witness statements. If this goes to court, you've got a strong case." Still, Mark knew this wasn't going to be easy. Even if he was in the right, legal battles were messy. They cost time, money, and peace of mind. Over the next few weeks, things quieted down a bit. The neighborhood began to heal. People smiled at each other again. Some even thanked Mark for standing up to Deborah. But behind closed doors, things were still shifting. Then one morning, Mark got a call from someone unexpected, an investigator named Ms. Harper from the State Attorney General's office. "I've been looking into some complaints about HOA abuse in Brookside Estates," she said, "and I came across your name. Would you be willing to speak with me about what happened?" Mark agreed immediately. Later that week, he met with Ms. Harper in a small conference room at the local courthouse. He brought all the violation notices, the video footage, the police report, and even copies of emails between himself and Deborah. He explained how it had all started with a simple lawn issue, then spiraled into something much worse. Ms. Harper listened carefully, taking notes and occasionally pausing to ask questions. "This isn't the first time we've seen something like this," she said finally. "There are HOA leaders across the state who misuse their power, but rarely do they go as far as flooding someone's basement." She asked if Mark would be willing to testify if the case went further. "I will," he said without hesitation, "because this wasn't just about me. It was about control, and nobody should live in fear of their HOA." Back home, Mark shared what had happened with a few close neighbors. Word spread quickly. Soon, others started coming forward with their own stories. One man said Deborah once reported him to the city for painting his garage door the wrong shade of gray. A woman remembered being fined because her child left a basketball near the sidewalk. But the most shocking story came from Mrs. Delaney, an elderly widow who lived at the end of the street. "She locked the gate to my backyard," Mrs. Delaney told a group of neighbors gathered at the park. "I couldn't get to my garden, said I had unapproved plants growing near the fence." People shook their heads, others muttered under their breath. For the first time, the community was united, not in silence but in anger. Soon a second petition started circulating. This one wasn't just about removing Deborah from the HOA board. This one demanded new rules for how HOAs operated in the area. Residents wanted transparency, limits on fines, and a way to hold HOA leaders accountable if they abused their power. Mark helped organize meetings. He reached out to local reporters. He even spoke to a radio show about what happened to him and how HOA laws needed to change. Meanwhile, Deborah stayed quiet, at least publicly. She stopped showing up at neighborhood events. Her house remained dark at night. But people still saw her walking through the street sometimes alone, head held high, like she hadn't lost anything at all. Then one evening, Mark got another call, this time from Officer Ramirez. "You might want to sit down," the officer said. "What happened?" Mark asked. "We found more evidence," Ramirez said. "Someone else came forward with footage from their security camera. Shows Deborah doing the same thing to another homeowner last year." Mark's heart pounded. "So, does that mean—" "It means we're moving forward," the officer said. "Prosecutors think they have enough for formal charges." That night, Mark sat outside on his porch and stared at the stars. He thought about everything that had happened, the fines, the stress, the flooded basement. He thought about how scared he'd been to speak up and how powerful Deborah had seemed at first. But now things were changing. Not just for him, for everyone, and for the first time in a long time, Mark felt like justice might actually come. Deborah Langston had been charged with criminal mischief and vandalism. The video footage from multiple homes, combined with witness statements and the police report Mark had filed, gave prosecutors enough to move forward. It wasn't just about Mark's flooded basement anymore. This was now a full investigation into years of possible abuse of power. Mark felt a strange mix of emotions when he heard the news. Relief, yes, but also disbelief. For so long, Deborah had seemed untouchable, like she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. Now, suddenly, she was facing real punishment. The court date was set for late fall. In the weeks leading up to the trial, Mark worked closely with the prosecutor's office. He met with Ms. Harper again, along with another lawyer assigned to the case. They asked him to prepare a statement, something that explained how everything started, what Deborah had done, and how it affected his life. He sat at his kitchen table, one evening staring at a blank notepad. How did he explain the stress? The sleepless nights? The feeling of being watched every time he stepped outside? He decided to start simple. "I bought my home because I wanted peace," he wrote. But instead I found fear. When the day of the trial arrived, the courtroom was packed. Not just with lawyers and officials, but with neighbors, people who had once stayed silent out of fear or frustration. Mrs. Delaney sat in the front row. Mr. Carter was there too. Even people who hadn't directly suffered under Deborah's rule showed up to support Mark and the others who had come forward. Deborah walked in wearing a dark blazer and sunglasses. She looked calm, almost bored, as if this was just another meeting she expected to win. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then the trial began. First, the prosecution laid out the facts. The violation notices Mark received, the pattern of behavior, the flood, the video evidence. They played the footage of Deborah hosing water into Mark's basement window well. Gasps echoed through the room. Then came the witnesses. Mark was called first. He told the whole story, from the moment he got the first lawn notice, all the way. Through the flood and the months of fighting back. He didn't try to sound dramatic, he just spoke honestly. And when he finished, even some of the jurors nodded quietly. Next came Mrs. Delaney. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she described how Deborah locked her out of her own backyard garden. Then came the man with the basketball fine, the woman with the Christmas lights, and several others. Each story added another layer to the image of Deborah, not just as a strict HOA leader, but as someone who used her position to control and punish people. Finally, the defense tried to fight back. Deborah's lawyer argued that she was only doing her job. She followed HOA rules exactly, he said. If homeowners didn't follow those rules, then fines were necessary. That's not abuse of power. It's enforcement. But the prosecutor fired back quickly. If enforcing the rules meant flooding basements, locking gates, and harassing elderly residents, she said, then we have a very serious problem. The courtroom fell silent after that. Then came the final speeches. The prosecution reminded everyone that Deborah had crossed the line from leadership to revenge. She wasn't protecting property values, the prosecutor said. She was punishing people who disagreed with her. The defense tried to make it sound like Mark had made a mountain out of molehills. Mr. Thompson exaggerated a small conflict into a personal war, the lawyer said. This case is based more on emotion than fact. But by then, most people weren't buying it. The jury went into deliberation. It took them less than a day. When they returned, the verdict was clear. Guilty. Deborah Langston was convicted of criminal mischief and vandalism. The judge sentenced her to a short jail term, community service, and ordered her to pay restitution to Mark and the other victims. As the officers moved to escort her out, Deborah finally showed some emotion, her face twisted with anger. She looked at Mark one last time. "This isn't over," she muttered, but Mark didn't flinch. "It is over," he said calmly. And as the courtroom doors closed behind her, something shifted, not just in the room, but in the neighborhood. People smiled at each other. Some clapped quietly, others hugged. For the first time in years, Brookside Estates felt like a place where people could live without fear. Mark walked outside into the cool fall air, feeling lighter than he had in months. Justice had taken time. It had cost him energy, money, and peace of mind. But it had come. And now maybe things could finally go back to normal. After the trial, life in Brookside Estates slowly started to feel normal again. The tension that had hung over the neighborhood for months began to lift. People smiled more. Kids played outside without their parents worrying about getting fined for something silly. Even the HOA meetings felt different, less like a courtroom and more like a community gathering. Mark noticed it right away. One morning he stepped outside and saw Mrs. Delaney walking toward her garden with a basket in her arm. She waved at him and smiled. "I got my key back," she said cheerfully. "They unlocked the gate yesterday." Mark smiled back. "That's great to hear," he said. It wasn't just the gate. The new HOA board was trying to fix things. They removed some of the stricter rules, created a review system so fines couldn't be issued without proof, and even set up a suggestion box for residents to share ideas. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was better. And then there was the news. Deborah's arrest had gone viral online. A local reporter had posted a short clip of her being led out of the courthouse in handcuffs. Within hours, the video spread across social media. People from other towns and even other states shared it. Some laughed, others were angry. Many called it a long overdue moment. Soon, lawmakers started paying attention. A few weeks after the trial, Mark received a call from someone he didn't expect, a state representative who worked on housing and community issues. "We've been hearing stories like yours from all over the state," the man said. "Your case has become a symbol of what can go wrong when HOAs have too much power." Mark listened carefully as the man explained that they were looking into new laws that would make it harder for HOA leaders to abuse their authority, laws that would protect homeowners from unfair fines, false accusations, and personal vendettas. "Would you be willing to speak at a public hearing?" the man asked. Mark thought for a moment. He hadn't planned on becoming an activist. He just wanted to live peacefully in his home. But now, he realized he had a chance to help others avoid the same struggle he went through. "I'll do it," he said. That's how Mark found himself standing in front of a room full of lawmakers, reporters, and concerned homeowners a few months later. He told them everything, from the first lawn notice to the flood to the fight for justice. He spoke calmly, clearly, and honestly. And when he finished, there was silence for a second, then slow, steady applause. The new HOA reform bill passed not long after. It didn't stop all HOA problems, of course, but it gave homeowners more protection, more rights, more say. Back in 1999 Brookside Estates, people kept working together to rebuild trust. Neighbors organized cleanup days, holiday parties, and even a small neighborhood watch. Not to report each other, but to look out for one another. Mark started volunteering with a local group that helped homeowners understand their rights. He gave talks at community centers and answered questions online. He didn't get paid for it, but it felt good to help. Then came the letter. It arrived in the mail one quiet afternoon. Mark opened it and read it slowly. It was from Deborah. She didn't apologize, not exactly, but she did write something surprising. "You made your point. I lost more than I expected. Maybe I went too far. I don't agree with everything that happened, but I'm done fighting. You won't hear from me again." Mark read it twice. He didn't know if she meant it. He didn't know if she'd ever truly regretted what she did. But he did know one thing. He didn't want revenge. He just wanted peace. He folded the letter and put it away. Time passed. The basement was finally dry and clean. The smell of mildew was gone. Mark replaced what he could: tools, storage bins, a few pieces of furniture. Some things like old photos and documents couldn't be fixed, but he learned to move forward. Every now and then he'd walk past the spot where Deborah used to stand with her clipboard, watching every little detail of his yard. Now, that space was empty. No clipboard, no threats, no fear, just quiet. And for the first time in a long time, Mark felt like he was really home. He looked around at the neighborhood, the trees, the houses, the kids playing basketball in the driveway next door, and smiled. Justice had come late, but it had come, and now, so, had peace.